Now we have the globalization of Indian cinema or Hindi cinema basically. This Hindi cinema was most identified with A grade or B grade. So initially there were only two categories, A grade and B grade. A grade were the A-listers acted and B grade were, you know, mainstream horror kind of films like Nagin, the other horror films like Jani Dushman and all. So the spectator profile has led to several identifiable kinds. Now there is a reshuffling of the films which is happening from grade A and B. Now they are not no longer categorized as A and B, but from A to E, and it is based on the spectator. Who are the people who are watching these films? Now, the Anglophone mainstream films, which are the urban people who generally watch um, these films as represented by Three Idiots. This is one of the films where we see that, you know, the Anglo mainstream audience likes these kind of films. Then we have the B, which is semi-urban films like Dabang, mostly the remake films of the southern industry we see and situate it in the semi-urban uh, uh, category. C, we have the continuation of the B, which is basically like films like Jism and Raj. And then we have comedy films in the D category like Vicky Donor and also Barfi that stand apart from mainstream Bollywood. So it is not exactly art cinema, but you know, some traces of art cinema in this D category of films, which is also comedy at the same time uh, with satire, and it is also catering to some of the social issues of those time. Many mainstream actors are working in this category, but these are not large budget films. So the budget also kind of situates this film in the D category. And then we have the E, which is dramatic, realistic, but less issue based cinema like Gangs of Wasseypur, The Lunchbox. What is striking is films like Wake Up Sid, Life in a Metro are kind of art cinema, but rather misplaced. You know, this category has been misplaced by actors like Ranbir Kapoor. So Ranbir Kapoor is doing the Anglo mainstream films. He is also doing this small, you know, D category Barfi kind of films, and then he is venturing into something called Wake Up Sid, where the audience is maturing with the character. So it is very individualistic in nature, and he is one who is catering and also rejecting it at the same time. Now budget became an indicator of such kind of films in this era, and the DVD revolution kind of made it even more accessible. So we see that this category of films moreover increased because of the coming of the channels, okay, and became a source of income for small category cinema. It was greatly indebted to DVD revolution. And then we have because of the globalization, now the market is open, we could get those DVDs in India and supply became really easy and convenient. And because of that, we witnessed a surge in the remake of the Hollywood films. So few Hollywood films that had a remake, not very renowned, but which left an impact on the or contributed to the Indian cinema. One such film was Manorama, which was a remake of 6 Feet Under. Then we had Zinda, which is a remake of Old Boy. Then there is Bheja Fry, Lee Diner de Cons, and then Shanghai, which is Z. The budget weakens the melodramatic motives, reasons being the moral side is scarcely visible and ethic of personal aspiration has been introduced. So, what is this ethic of personal aspiration is that how an individual uh, pursues the aspiration, on which level are they compromising with the ethics, that has been questioned in the motives of these melodramatic representation of the films. The moral side is scarcely visible of these protagonists. They are the protagonists who are playing such roles. Few films are Three Idiots, then there is Bunty and Bubbly and Guru. Especially in Bunty and Bubbly, very evidently these two become thieves and thugs. So you see, they are compromising on the ethics of personal, ethics or on moral side, and therefore it legitimizes the illegitimate in a way. And Dhoom 2 is a very good example again of legitimization of the illegitimate. There is the beginning scene of the film Dhoom 2 where we see that, you know, Hrithik Roshan is disguised as queen, and then he kind of steals the crown with the Kohinoor, and it is kind of reclaiming what was ours once, and therefore again legalizing the illegal. Then came some sports films. They obviously generated some sort of nationalism and patriotism. One such film was Chak De India, and uh, it is a film which was kind of putting the state to question as to what a state does for sports persons. Then we had Pan Singh Tomar and Iqbal. These revolved around, different games. So Chak De India was basically hockey, Pan Singh Tomar of course again with hockey, and then Iqbal with cricket. So these were few of the films which were popular films made on sports. We are not dwelling into the biopics, but again we can say significantly that these films had impacted. Now then comes, we have melodrama, and when we are talking about melodrama, Indian popular has been popular because of the melodrama. Now what is melodrama? The Indian melodrama is again very different from the Western melodrama that we talk about in film studies, or what M.K. Raghavendran has also discussed. Now it is the intense emotional polarization and schematization. So there is a lot of intensity that goes into the emotions, often portraying extreme situations with overt villainy. So the situations are very extreme. So what are the chances of a woman losing all the kids, three kids on the same day in Amar, Akbar and Anthony, and the husband also getting arrested on the same day? So we see the extreme situations like this, and overt villainy. For example, Mogambo. Now he is dipping the people in acid to kill them. Like this is very grotesque. Now, inflated expressions, abrupt changes in fortune. So, today I am son of a maybe supposed thief in Diwar, and tomorrow I just join the smugglers, and my fortune changes now. And then we have this famous dialogue between the two brothers, and there are quite dark plot lines. So this is the what makes it a melodrama. It draws heavily from emotionally charged everyday life events such as murder, crime, natural disasters, trials, arrest and impoverishments. So the trials, the dialogue between two people are intensified because of the kind of emotions that are brought in, and there is a lot of music also which adds to the emotional effect, and it further melodramatizes the scene. This genre focuses on dramatic violations of emotional relationships, showcasing tragedies like mother losing the child, as I just gave example. So therefore it kind of is evoking some sort of sympathy, and because so many things have happened with this lady in one day. But despite these dramatic events, Indian melodrama typically does not change the essence of the protagonist. So with the protagonist, nothing is changing. For example, in Diwar, he is crude, he is illegal, but we don't see that his nature is changing and he just transforms himself and becomes like a saint. No, he's not doing that. So this is very important to see how Indian melodrama places itself. So in films like Avara, characters like the judge, I already discussed the film Avara, Raj Kapoor and he being the son of a judge, exhibit subdued behavior, not due to personal remorse, but because of revelation like discovering a familial connection. So, you know, this attachment with the family is again brought up in melodrama. Additionally, there is a concept of moral occult which is present in Indian melodrama, where divine interventions of private deliberation by gods. So, basically what happens in when we are talking about this moral occult, um, there might be some instances in the film where a human cannot control the situation and the evil, and therefore there is a divine intervention that is taking place in the film in order to control the evil, or in order to eradicate the evil, or in order to eradicate the wrong. Now, for example, in the film Hum Aapke Hai Kaun, in the end scene, there is a dog. So, dog is the embodiment of something which is beyond human, uh, and what this dog does is that the protagonist's his brother is going to get married to the heroine. Now, the heroine writes a letter stating that I'm really sorry because of the circumstances. I am marrying your brother, your elder brother, but I really love you. Now, the dog takes the letter and gives it to the elder brother, and the elder brother comes to the realization that he was about to do a sin, and therefore he brings in the hero heroine together, and the film ends on a happy note. So, you see how this divine intervention in the form of this dog has been placed in the film. Now comes romance. Now, the closure of narratives. For example, all the films under the domain of romance have a similar kind of closures. So, it might end basically with a happy ending. So, the hero and the heroine finally patching up, the families have agreed, or they have eloped and they have got married. So, the closure is basically fixed. The closure of narratives, as it is saying, is closed because they repeatedly use familiar conventions. But there are few films which have a different closure. For example, in a film where protagonist entering a new state of realization, even if it leads to death. So, the hero decides that I am going to fight a war and I cannot marry, but now, but I'll come back and marry, but there could be a thing that he doesn't come back. So, you see the protagonist entering and also has a realization that he might not come back. Then there are characters learning something significant by the end of the story, Wake Up Sid, maturing to decide that they both are not good for each other, and then moving on with their lives, overcoming obstacles or finding peace with it. So, it might be that, you know, they again do not come over the obstacles of the family, and then they marry someone else. Silsila is also one such example. And then there is recognizing success or failure. So, the protagonists are basically, the romance becomes a kind of a subplot in the film, and recognizing success or failure becomes the main plot line of the story, demonstrating the maturing and growth of individual. Again, the same example which is Wake Up Sid. And then we have weakening or defeat as seen in the story, which is Devdas. So, in the end, Devdas dies. So, Qayamat Se Qayamat Tak is another example where you know, they kind of die together in the end. They believe that the society cannot understand them and it is better for them to die. And why the romance hinges on some ideas, or why the films basically made on romance hinges on some points. What are those points? One is the Hindu philosophical term of life. So, there is brahmacharya, there is grihastha, and there is sannyasi. So, moving on from the brahmacharya, which is the student life, to the grihastha is very important to showcase in order to keep alive the Hindu philosophy of life stages. And there is Vanasprata and Sannyasa. So, Vanaspata is retired, and then Sannyasa is renunciating the life, and these are recognized. So, the narrative closure in films often aligns with these life stages. Marrying symbolizes significant culmination, particularly the transition from brahmacharya to grihastha has been addressed in the romantic films or romance films. The connection highlights how film narratives can reflect broader cultural and philosophical themes, echoing social values. So, bringing in again the idea of Indian culture and tradition with the idea of Hindu philosophy and placing it so that it echoes the societal values in the film is what is important, and this is how the romantic films or the romance films, the popular romance films have been made in India. Now, another very important topic is mythology. And why mythology is so important to see and witness is because the Indian cinema, which is taken from Parsi theatre, has different genres of mythology. Now, when we say mythology, it is not restricted to the Hindu mythology alone, but bringing in from or inheriting from the Parsi theatre, also from the Iranian legends. So, we have other, we have historical dramas as well, from which, and romances from poetry that are taken and brought in the realm of what we call as mythology. So, we have elements from Arabian night fantasies, and then we have historical events and narratives from plays and legends like Raja Harishchandra. Then we have Rustam and Shohrab, we have Shireen Farhad, and significantly it shows the cultural importance of India. Now, obviously India has been ruled by Mughals, so therefore we cannot divide the mythology, but instead we can integrate the mythology of the Iranian and also the Persian, bringing in again Arabian Nights. So, there are films like which has been made by Himanshu Rai called Ali Baba and Chalis Chor, and it was made in association with the Soviet Union, and it is one of the highest grossing films in Soviet Union as well. Now, scholars like John Lydon have said that cinema is like a Kasi religious experience, and it explores images, relationships, beliefs, desires and fears through specific forms, and notably the revered status of film stars. So, religious films historically associated with women, and the reason being they were traditionally avoided by elite, and women were the people who were at home. Okay, women were the people who were catering to the traditions more, and therefore it was also liked or historically associated with women more. So, the elites did not like the mythological films. They are construed as non-religious. Then we have the fashionable youths also who did not like the films made on mythological films. The cinematic portrayal of religious themes mirror broader social values and spiritual traditions, which enriches the overarching uh, domain of Indian cinema, and it adds to the cultural fabric of India as a whole. Now, these cinemas were somehow influenced by foreign films. One such example was Life of Christ, where Dada Saheb Phalke got his inspiration to make Raja Harishchandra. But we have Cecil D. Millis productions like Ten Commandments and King of the Kings. So, which also exemplifies that God is box office. There is a book by Kajri Jain where she talks about gods in the bazaar, and how the economy has been or the consumption or commodification of gods has taken place. So, suggesting that religious subject matters can draw large audience. Okay. Now, there are devotional films also which can be construed under religious films. Mythology is also one of them, and Rachel Doyle's book Filming the Gods discuss it in length. One devotional film made in Gujarati was Narsi Mehta, witnessing Vraj Leela. And there is another film, Jai Santoshi Ma, again very important, narrates the birth and rise of goddess Santoshi. Now, what is the striking difference between mythological cinema and devotional cinema is mythology basically tells the story of the gods, whereas devotional talks about the relationship between God and a human or the individual. So, that is a basic difference between the two. What important is in these films is the idea of darshan. Christopher Finney has discussed the concept of darshan, and it emphasizes on the exchange of looks between the god and the human or the devotee, and it has been seen as a tactile connection. And in Ponty's idea, it is double sensation, where seeing becomes a form of touching. So, the god comes and it takes a glance at the devotee, and the devotee is also glancing at the deity, and in that moment there is something called double sensation happening. Being touched and touching, both of them are happening at the same moment. Now, in the early Indian, cinema, we had other films which were made on the similar theme of mythology and devotion, such as Buddhadev, Savitri, and Prem Sannyasa. Kamala Bai Gokhale was one lady or women actor who was introduced through mythology films, and perhaps she was the first female actress to act in Indian cinema. These films showcase a rich tapestry of religious, mythological and historical narratives that has shaped the Indian cinematic history. Then we have Islamicate films. Now, Islamicate films can be put in genres. Historical films, where we have fantasy, then we have fantasy and courtesan films, and these were the popular Islamicate films. These historical films basically dealt with, the history of the religion. Fantasy basically about films like Ali Baba Chalis Chor, then there is Shireen Farhad, where there are magical instances, the flying carpet. And then we have courtesan films like Umrao Jaan, which cater to uh, the not the religious aspect of Islam as a religion, but more to the culture of Islam. And in these courtesan films, we saw two kind of themes, where these courtesans were challenging the society at large, and second, it was talking about the male voyeurism and the fantasies that were portrayed. And few films of the Islamicate genres were Mehboob's film Al Hilal. This, or it is also called The Judgment of Allah, and this Al Halal used, again we can see some political connotations through the terminologies that he uses, like Gulam, Azad, Qaidi. Then we have Humayun, starring Nargis and Ashok Kumar, which emphasizes the good relation between Mughals and the Rajputs, again bringing in the idea of secularism, and it also shows Islamic miracles. So, a son is sick and a father is praying, and in that moment he prays that his son should be saved, even if if he has to die. So, a lightning strikes him and he dies, and the son is saved. So, the idea of Islamic miracle is also present, and Islamicate films are more known because of its use of poetry and Urdu. So, Urdu poetry represents poet like of yester times, Majhoor Sultanpuri and Shahir Ludhianvi. Then with the moving time, the lyricists, who came, who wrote Urdu lyrics were Anand Bakshi, and then we have today we can see the contemporary Javed Akhtar and Gulzar taking up. Earlier, what is very important to note is that Urdu was used and spoken before independence by Hindus and Sikhs and, you know, uh, in India and around India, and it was like one of the widespread usage. But with the coming of partition, India most now dominates is dominated by Hindi language and the usage of Sanskrit.